Australian scenery is unique. The Outback is fascinating thanks to its vast wilderness, rugged mountains and seemingly infinite emptiness. Due to its harsh environment, the Northern Territory resisted white settlement for the longest period of time. The top end, the northernmost part of the territory, and the red centre, the name of which comes from the soil containing ferric oxide, which is responsible for the ever-present red colour, are separated by huge distances one should not underestimate. The Outback has not only a rich geological world, but also an animal kingdom full of amazing species one has to discover. The capital of the Northern Territory is Darwin. However, it usually serves only as a stop-off point. Its location by the sea makes it a city of economic importance, but it also provides the first site, the aqua scene on the Dr. Scully Road. 30 years ago, one of the residents started to feed fish here. It soon became a ritual. Today, hundreds of red mullet, sea barbel and catfish swim up to the coast with the high tide to be fed from people's hands. Children in particular are happy to experience sea animals so closely.
And I like getting splashed, and I like only thing I don't like is my hand getting beat from a big fish.
The didgeridoo, today an instrument popular worldwide. Many teenagers want to learn to play this unusual pipe. There are many books or courses available for you to learn to play the instrument all over the world. This woodwind instrument originates from Australia. Aborigines have played their songs on it for many centuries to tell the history of their people. Of course, you can get good advice and the best instruction directly from an expert.
Circular breathing basically involves breathing in through the nose, blowing out through the mouth, like so. And then combining with that blowing coming in through the nose and out through the mouth, compress your lips like blowing a big raspberry, like so. So combine that with the breathe in and blow out. But after a while it all becomes automatic, you don't even think about it. So that is basically what circular breathing is all about. Very simple. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Very simple.
It seems, however, it's not that easy to get a tone from this wooden pipe. The beginner will use up a lot of breath before he or she gets the right technique, that's for sure. The landscape surrounding Darwin manifests the infinite remoteness. Many hours can pass before you meet a soul. Now and then you catch a sight of a termite nest stretching to the sky. Typical of this swampy coastal area are the deep and dense mangrove forests. Treetops over brackish waters are home to countless bird species. Dangerous animals feel also particularly at home here in the solitary swamps. Crocodiles can reach enormous size and strength here. Here in the area around Darwin, you can experience these huge reptiles on crocodile farms from the closest proximity possible. Unfortunately, such facilities do not exist merely to protect the animals, but also for the purpose of production of handbags. They are well camouflaged from their enemies. 2 swamp-coloured eyes and a pair of olive-green nostrils often lie almost invisibly. Unpredictably in any case in water. They grab suddenly and disappear as fast as they emerged. Deaths, thankfully, are rather rare. There have been only 7 fatal cases in the Northern Territory and 14 in the whole of Australia recorded in the last 27 years. About half an hour south from Darwin, you find the Territory Wildlife Park. Here you can closely observe typical Australian inhabitants in their natural habitat. For example, some species of sea animals as well as many curious terrestrials. One of the park's inhabitants with a variety of species is the emu, together with the kangaroo, an emblem of the continent. This amazing running bird can grow to the height of 1.5 meters. There are, of course, kangaroos and wallabies here too. There are dozens of their kinds varying in size, colour and physiognomy. The Territory Wild Park serves also in a way as a special kind of orphanage for the animals that have lost their mothers, most often in a car accident. The keepers are devoted to tending their patients. They also show, especially to the young guests, how to treat animals well. Our journey to the Red Centre heads southwards across the Northern Territory for nearly 1,500 kilometres. Alice Springs, a small Australian outback town reminding you of the good old Wild West, is on our way. The Outback has its own rules. Since a lot of families live many kilometres apart, it's not possible for the children to go to school together. Alice Springs has dealt uniquely with this problem.
Let's get started with today's lesson. You have your book, The Devil's Own.
They run a boat, correct?
The School of the Air educates the pupils over the radio. Such lessons have about 140 pupils from an area of 1.3 kilometres squared. The children usually live on cattle stations, Aboriginal settlements, national parks or camps, set up due to highway construction. Regular school attendance is impossible for them. Short classes are compensated for by a lot of homework though.
I didn't hear you, Brody. Could you say it again?
No, I said that she didn't want.
I went up to the first chapter.
Our time is over for today. I would like for you to read chapters 3 and 4. Goodbye, Year 7 students.
And Joella, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Boyd, and I have 2 lots of news.
There is a need for highly committed teachers such as Terry Modlick and Ed Boyd to teach the 4 to 13-year-olds. Then the children decide themselves whether they want to continue their education or not. If so, there are many boarding houses available. Life in Alice Springs concentrates mainly in the Todd Mall. The majority of the shops and cafes are in the central pedestrian precinct. You can always meet a lunatic in Alice Springs, but don't worry, the average inhabitants are quite normal. The number of inhabitants numbers about 23,000. Surprisingly, the atmosphere of an unspoiled small town prevails here, despite the fact that Alice Springs is visited by 400,000 travellers wanting to see the Red Centre every year. Aboriginal art galleries are certainly worth visiting. The pictures by Australian Aborigines, painted in rich colours, are full of imagination and have a calming effect on spectators. There is always a story behind each picture. Even if you can't unearth it, the simple geometric beauty absorbs you. Next, it's worth dropping into Scotty's Tavern in the Todd Mall. The fact that it's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon doesn't discourage anybody from drinking beer. There is always some time for socialising. The owner, Scotty, continually draws beer for the thirsty customers of his tavern. The pub has real Outback decor with old photographs and genuine furniture for guests, so that they feel like they are really part of it. If you seek adventure and excitement, one can take a balloon over the Australian wilderness from Alice Springs. Preparations begin whilst it is still dark. Wind is examined with a small testing balloon. Before all the ropes are unwound, all the safety precautions are made, and the balloon is ready. The light slowly grows. When the whole team is in the basket, the flame begins to raise the balloon.
You can see that's a bit quieter, that one.
Depending on your choice, one flight in a balloon takes 30 to 60 minutes. However, you can't change the time of your departure because the wind is at its most constant during early morning, and therefore the flight is safer at that time. The balloon floats over the plains of the Outback, the McDonnell Ranges, and various natural phenomena, allegedly created by different spirits. A breathtaking view of the infinite horizon captivates you until the air is slowly released from the balloon and you begin your descent. As soon as the participants are on terra firma again, this experience is celebrated with champagne. Straight after the flight, you can take part in an Aboriginal Dreamtime tour. The history, culture and life of the Aborigines who live in this part of Australia are represented vividly and without any embroidery.
Food and water, seafood and all that sort of stuff, maybe only a few square feet per person. Roughly around about 200 different tribes lived in Australia before we turned up here. It's obviously just a rough estimate. They're shown here on the map, roughly in the different parts of Australia that they occupied. Now the people that we've been dealing with this morning are people from the Warlpiri tribe, which is this area here. Okay, around here in Alice Springs, which is here, was traditionally occupied by the arid people around this area here, and the Warlpiri from this area. Okay, and that area is roughly about the same size as England. Okay, give or take a few square feet. And in England today, I think there's about 50-60 million people living there, and the total population of this area before we turned up, roughly about 1,600. Okay, and the total population of Australia of only about 300,000.
Aboriginal Dreamtime, their philosophy, cannot be understood literally as a time of dreams. Rather, dream means living and being on a pilgrimage, and it comprises their whole existence. Paintings are highly valued among the Warlpiri people. Since they didn't have any writing system at their disposal, they recorded their history and stories using colours and figures. The Aborigines certainly have an interesting and unique culture. Some of them are not happy when you disturb them in their everyday lives with cameras, observation, or intrusive questions. By contrast, the Warralpiri people see themselves as teachers who are glad and proud to enable you to gain an insight into their
Now,
traditions.
traditionally, they would cook the whole kangaroo, not just the tail.
The Warralpiri, like other pre-literate peoples, used to sustain themselves on what the bush provided. They hunted kangaroos and cooked them on fires and baked them in ashes. They ate seeds, fruits and roots, but they also picked worms and caterpillars, which are excellent sources of proteins. Songs and dances symbolise the preserved traditions and life of the Warralpiri. They represent fighting and hunting, living in their community and the constant search for nourishment. When the work is done, the Warralpiri return to their ordinary life. The next site not to be missed is the Desert Park, lying barely 10 kilometres westward from Alice Springs, on the outer McDonnell Ranges. In the Desert Park, you can experience the nature and animal wildlife of an Australian desert. In the nocturnal house, it is possible to observe small nocturnal animals. These strange little creatures have their home here, between clumps of spinifex grass. The thorny devil, different species of salamanders and lizards and various rodents are perfectly adapted to the poor desert region. Division of the territory makes it even possible for them to have their siesta without being disturbed by their natural predators. Every day, a variety of different bird shows are presented in this natural theatre. You can watch the flying and hunting techniques of free-flying birds of prey.
We need to feed them the whole dead body of the animal to keep it healthy. So they take the bits that they need and they digest those, and the rest, things like feathers.
The wedge-tailed eagle is the largest Australian raptor, growing up to 1 metre in length. You can observe this bird closely not only here in the Desert Park, but also on isolated interior roads where it searches for its prey. The eagle is a carnivore and feeds on countless run-over animal carcasses. Visitors to the bird shows can witness the intelligence and ingenuity of this bird on its search for food.
They'll certainly have to go shed their feathers, not all of them at once, but they shed their ragged feathers and replace them with new ones. This is what we call a molt. Now obviously they don't shed them all at once because not only would they look pretty silly, picked up a rock and threw it at them. Looks like a rain has some fruit bush. There she goes. She doesn't realise she's broken it.
The real adventures occur on the gravel roads everybody has to use on his or her way across the Outback. If you travel alone, you should make sure you have a vehicle manual at hand in case of need, for example when your axle breaks or you get a flat tyre. Here is another site 24 kilometres further south. A beautiful canyon called Simpson's Gap opens here between the mountains and the McDonnell Ranges. It is famous particularly due to the fact that it is home to wallabies. These funny animals are hard to spot at first in the gravel, but as soon as your eyes adjust, wallabies emerge everywhere. This species of dwarf kangaroo has adapted to living in the mountains. Swift and sure-footed, the wallabies run around without a care. After such an interesting experience, we continue our ride southwest and cover another 300 kilometres. Foot off the gas, say barrels turned into signs along the barely passable sections of the road. You are never alone in the Outback. Again and again you meet the inhabitants of this wild country. A lot of people in the Outback live on cattle stations. Tough cowboys drive huge herds of cattle for long weeks across the bush. The stations are up to 5,000 kilometres squared in size. 5,000 kilometres squared means that you have to travel around 70 or 80 kilometres to your nearest neighbour. But due to the poor soil, there are only 1.5 to 4 heads of cattle per 1 kilometre square. In the north, the cattle stations are even larger. The largest one, Anna Creek, has 38,000 kilometres squared, making it the size of Switzerland. Though cowboys have the latest equipment, they still have to work hard sometimes. On the way to Kings Canyon, you can admire the typical Outback in all its beauty. The last unbelievably dusty kilometres to Kings Creek Station continue across vast red-coloured gravel plains. It's an ideal place to have a snack, to fuel up your car, or to get ready for sleep in the nearby camp. If you, contrary to your expectations, haven't met a kangaroo on the way across Australia yet, you have a chance to see it in the small Kings Creek Station's park. In 1850, the first camels were brought to Australia from Afghanistan. These desert animals were thought to be particularly strong, and they were supposed to help the farmers as drafters. After motor cars were imported, the animals were set free, the result being that they started to breed without any restraint. What's particularly funny about it is that Australia has the highest number of camels in the world today. The Wataraka National Park lies on the way south. It has a small natural wonder, Kings Canyon. Good footwear and sufficient water supplies are necessary for a 4-hour hike around the deepest canyon of the Red Centre. You have to be careful all the time on your way, and you shouldn't leave the trails because the sandstone weathers out and disintegrates easily. Kings Canyon used to be a sacred place for the Aborigines, whose land adjoins the national park today. Water, with its natural power, has created the canyon over the course of 350 million years. The rock sides fall up to 270 metres down the canyon. It's a fascinating sight. The mighty walls seem to be as smooth as if they were planed. The breathtaking depth demonstrates again the power of nature. Compared to this, the small oasis with the symbolic name Garden of Eden looks almost unreal. A small gap with palms around it feeds a waterfall that drops down to the bottom of the chasm. In the natural pool, you can even bathe when the temperature is comfortable. It's hard to believe that this small stream could have unleashed such forces that tore the canyon into a mountain range. Red sand tells a story about its inhabitants. You can find camel and bird footprints, but you can also experience an unpleasant encounter with aggressive ants. But the outback provides a surprise once more, a herd of wild horses. The animals are very curious and sometimes they surround the visitors, being less afraid than the travellers could claim. It's an exciting experience for both parties, and the beauty of the animals takes you aback. Between Kings Canyon and Ayers Rock, there is a mythical land incorporating Lake Amadeus. This large saline lake stretches for more than 100 kilometres across the area of Ayers Rock, preventing direct access. When you go round the lake, the symbol of the outback, Ayers Rock, soon appears before the travellers. This monolith is correctly called Uluru, which means shady place, in the Aboriginal language Anangu. UNESCO has declared the national park around Uluru a Natural and Cultural World Heritage Site, thanks to its beauty and its cultural importance. The rusty red monolith extends for 3.5 kilometres, and its maximum height is 348 metres. Surrounded by unique mystery, Uluru has always been, thanks to its permanent water source, a life provider. Every day, legions of tourists file up the Red Mountain. There you find a matchless view of the surrounding scenery, which absorbs every traveller. The nature here is quite varied. You find countless plant species. Contrary to the poor land of the rest of the outback, nature has secured the survival of many plants as well as animals at Ayers Rock. This is largely due to its water source. Hundreds of thousands of visitors come to Ayers Rock every year. In order to respect and empathise with Aboriginal beliefs, they admire the mountain only from below. Uluru is sacred to the Aborigines, therefore to climb it is prohibited. The rangers of the national park are here primarily to protect this important place from all sources of danger. For example, danger from imported plant species.
One of the jobs rangers have is to help restore biodiversity, which means increasing the diversity of life. And that starts with the plants. This plant here is a species of spinifex, and growing around the base was a weed called bufflegrass. And if you look around, all that grey and yellow area is bufflegrass, which has been sprayed. This has been quite successful. It hasn't returned, and we can see a diversity of plants, different plants, wildflowers, grasses, starting to come back.
It is evident that there are more disasters that have been caused in Australia by the whites than only rabbits and toads. This area is sacred for the Anamoch. It's a place of great spiritual importance, and it is firmly established in their churpa, meaning those who can enter specific ceremonial places depending on sex, age and status. The visitors are also glad to respect these rules. Australia is a destination for both young and old, one which you will never forget.